On the broadcast tonight, money talks. South Korean and U.S. officials begin 2 days of negotiations on how much each country will pay to keep the American military on the Korean peninsula. And it's not all smooth sailing. To revamp the market, the Korean government unveils plans to reduce the supply in the housing market in another bid to normalize the prolonged slump in the nation's real estate market. We'll have the details. And no more wasteful spending. China bans government and party divisions from constructing new buildings for the next 5 years. This as that country seeks to cut wasteful spending. Early edition begins now. It is 5 a.m. in New York, 10 in London, and 6 on a Wednesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gonyo.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for tuning in. The Korean government's plans to normalize real estate, that's our starting point for today.
Right, as part of efforts to revitalize the slumping housing market and promote consumption, the Korean government has unveiled plans to cut the supply of new homes in Seoul and surrounding areas.
The government also plans a tax cut for home buyers. Our Kim Young-gil starts us off.
Korea's finance minister and deputy prime minister Hyun Ho-seok said on Wednesday the government will scale back planned supply of new apartments and houses to help revitalize the country's housing market. Hyun told a meeting of economic policymakers that the reduction is necessary in view of dwindling demand for new houses. Under a proposal prepared by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, the government will either cancel or delay the planned supply of 180,000 housing units in Seoul and surround areas over the next 3.5 years. About a third of Korea's 50 million population reside in the metropolitan areas. The government will also provide soft loans to buyers of unsold apartments to promote housing transactions. Prices of houses have been dropping in recent years, prompting many potential buyers to seek rents. That led to soaring prices in jeonse, a unique Korean system where people deposit a large key money, which is repaid after their rental contracts expire. To help solve the jeonse problem, the government will offer government-built apartments for rents at relatively low prices.
In order to ease instability in the housing rent market, the supply of government-financed homes for rents will continue to be expanded.
Wednesday move comes less than 4 months after the government introduced tax breaks and other benefits to first-time home buyers. Seoul officials said a cut in property acquisition tax will also be announced as early as August to inject vitality into the slumping property market. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Starting in August, Korean households that earn less than 3 million won, or around $2,700 a month, will be able to receive up to $18,000 in medical aid from the government. The health ministry on Wednesday unveiled a temporary aid program that aims to ease the burden on low-income people suffering serious illnesses such as cancer or rare and intractable diseases. Now, the program will run for 2 to 3 years and cover a total of 138 illnesses. The government has already secured $27 million in this year's supplementary budget to pay for the program and will provide the aid through the National Health Insurance Service.
A parliamentary committee looking into allegations that the nation's spy agency interfered in last year's presidential election got back to work on Wednesday. They're starting with a progress report from the Justice Ministry. Our Kim Yeon-ji reports.
On Wednesday, Justice Minister Hwang Kyo-won gave lawmakers a progress report on the prosecution's investigation into the NIS scandal. Prosecutors have indicted former National Intelligence Service Chief Won Se-hun on charges of election law violations. Won is accused of ordering NIS agents to post negative comments online about opposition presidential candidates before the election. Lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party argue that the indictment is unreasonable. They say the 73 online posts the prosecution claims are problematic are normal for someone from the intelligence agency's psychological intelligence team. However, the opposition lawmakers argue that the NIS's actions constitute a major breach of law that brought the ruling party a favorable election result. The Democratic Party lawmakers argued the prosecution should indict everyone involved in the case. The parliamentary probe took an unexpected turn when a DP lawmaker claimed he had a recording of a conversation between a ruling party figure and his acquaintances before the election. In a transcript of the conversation released, Kwon Young-se, who led the Park Geun-hye camp at the time, is quoted as saying the NIS got its hands on the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit minutes and produced a distorted excerpt. Kwon is also quoted as saying that they should release the excerpt when they take office. The DP lawmakers added the release of the summit transcript is another form of election interference by the NIS. But the Saenuri lawmakers argued that the summit transcript has nothing to do with the allegations of the NIS's election interference and that the Kwon Young-se recording had been obtained illegally. Lawmakers still have a number of obstacles to overcome before the probe can proceed further. The rival parties have yet to decide who they will summon as witnesses and whether to make the NIS progress report due out on Friday public. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Top leaders and military officials from South Korea and the U.S. agree that the two countries' strong alliance is essential to maintaining peace on the Korean peninsula.
But when it boils down to finances, the two sides aren't seeing eye to eye on a key issue, which is something they'll try and resolve over the next 2 days during talks in Seoul. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun reports.
How much should South Korea and the U.S. each pay in order to keep U.S. troops stationed in South Korea? To finalize the respective military cost-sharing amount for the next 5 years, high-ranking officials from the two countries launched their second round of negotiations in Seoul this Wednesday.
Today and tomorrow, we look forward to having productive and in-depth discussions based on our previous meeting in Washington. I hope we can narrow our differences in the spirit of alliance.
All of us know what a serious task we have ahead of us, but I think it was a good start in Washington, and we look forward, like you do, to making more progress during these discussions in Seoul for our bilateral relationship and the alliance.
South Korea has been paying about $800 million each year since their last cost-sharing agreement was signed in 2009. But the two countries are expected to have a harder time settling on an amount this time around. With ever-increasing missile and nuclear threats from North Korea, coupled with Washington's internal pressure from the sequestration or automatic spending cuts in federal budget, U.S. officials are likely to press South Korean officials to pay more from next year. Some experts argue that Washington may also use the wartime operational control card to further pressure Seoul, which has asked the U.S. to delay the transfer in the wake of North Korea's provocative acts. But it wouldn't be easy for the South Korean government to take on a near $1 billion share, an amount some experts predict the U.S. could suggest at the meeting. There are rising voices within the country that the cost-sharing amount is already too high, and reports about how the U.S. has not yet spent a large sum of money received from the South are adding to hostility towards raising the country's payment for the U.S. troops. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Well, South Korea and the United States have kicked off the 2 days of talks to renew a cost-sharing agreement for American troops stationed in the South.
In the second round of talks, we have the U.S., of course, there, reportedly demanding Seoul increase its share of the costs, citing Washington's sequester spending cuts, while South Korea said the decision on the appropriate level should be made in consideration of numerous factors.
The point of contention is quite evident here. Both South Korean and U.S. forces want to save up. So on what grounds are the two sides making their cases, and how plausible are each side's arguments?
Joining us live to give us some perspective is Dr. Kim Chol-woo, director of the Korean Institute for Defense Analysis. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Kim.
Glad to be here.
All right, now during the two-day talks here in Seoul, the two allies will be renewing the current cost-sharing agreement, which is a special measures agreement, as it's called. Now, what are the main points of contention, and what should we be on the lookout for?
My understanding is the main point of contention is numbers, the percentage numbers, and the crunching numbers, and fine-tuning the numbers. The point of contention is how can Washington and Seoul split the tab of military, spending costs. The one thing we should clear about is that this is not a paycheck for the U.S. personnel in Korea. This is non-personnel stationing cost. It comprises of three main sectors. One thing is the South Korean civilians who is employed by USFK, where with that money, costing sharing money, that they can pay for that, labor money. And the other thing is the construction of military facilities. Finally, the logistical support section. Overall, the numbers is very important in this case. And this year, for example, 2013, we South Koreans supporting the USFK stationing here is with the amount of 336 billion won. But since the 2001, we are paying that amount of money in won because of the exchange rate fluctuation. In US dollars, roughly 333 million won, million US dollars. But I think the overall, the percentage rate is very important. $733 billion comprise of 42% of the stationing cost over here. So I think, again, numbers is very important. Yeah, we can share the good lip servicing because our negotiation chief is seasoned diplomat. They can have a very good atmosphere. But at the final stage of implementation, numbers and percentage is very crucial thing.
Very practical things, right?
Right, digits are all that matters at the moment. In the first round, I heard they agreed to disagree on the respective expenses in keeping U.S. troops in Korea. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
More specifically, the South Korean Parliament, National Assembly, pointed out the transparency issue. So they even mentioned what amount of the total payment South Koreans are supporting U.S. should be non-cash payments. For the construction of U.S. military facilities here, South Koreans argue that up to 30% we can pay for it in goods rather than cash. So I think that could be a very important point. The other thing is the appropriate level of amount is depending on the situation, change the situation. North Korean threat, United States sequestration pressure. It's very complicated challenges ahead. So, but this is not the first time since 1991 up to this 8th, 9th time. We know each other's weak points and strong points. So I don't see any kind of disruptive corrections or increase. Maximum level at the 8th special measures agreements, we reached the deal of the 4% maximum. So I hope that no more than 4%, which means we cannot reach the 50-50 split, is far too high for the South Koreans.
Because we know each other too well.
Yeah.
Right. So, like you said, the U.S. want us to cover 1/2 the cost, and you, Dr. Kim, you're saying that it's impossible. Of course, South Korea counteracted that and said we could actually give them a slight raise, but we can't go on to cover 1/2 the total cost. What's the South Korean government's concern with regard to this? I mean, is it just the cost itself, or are there other factors that we need to take into account?
The President Park Geun-hye's milestone of summit meeting with the United States Barack Obama, we again verified the so-called comprehensive strategic alliance. So I think with that, the newly burgeoning issue is the wartime operation control. I think that this is totally different issue. But the general public, South Korean media in particular, they're trying to linkage those two different issues. I don't buy those kind of arguments. It's totally different. So at this point, we have to focus only on how can you reach the agreement to the appropriate amount of money. Money is numbers and percentages, not the wartime operation control. Yes, some of the experts can bring up those issues, but I don't want to support that argument.
Okay, we are talking about two allies discussing the amount of money they need to fork up. The hardest thing to discuss among friends is, of course, money. In terms of bargaining chips, do we have an ace up our sleeves?
Yes. Although the negotiating chips could reach the agreement, but you have to go through the parliamentary approval. Parliamentary, with all the detailed information and the unused amount of money, according to the parliamentary research, for the last 4 or 5 years, the United States forces here in Korea haven't used up to the $400 million because of the delay of the Yongsan relocation plan at the Pyeongtaek. So I think that there is a bone of contention. So I think the parliamentary pressure as an excuse to reduce down the level of less than $1 billion of a marginal, psychological, threshold is that $1 billion US dollar. It's too much for us.
But on the other side, the U.S. has its Congress too, and it needs to get its congressional approval for anything to get passed by. So we really seem to need to find the midway there. What would that be? So
United States the Senate Armed Services Committee pointed out the rising cost of the stationing cost here in Korea. But let's get down to the details of the expenditures, which requires transparency issue. What's the real actually cost, and let's chop it down, and we can support to the certain amount of level of amount of money. But the agreement is agreement. For the last 8th agreement, we reached the agreement. Maximum is 4%, including the consumer price index. It's reasonable. So all of a sudden, because this agreement can continue to the coming 4 or 5 years, increasing level. So I think that we are at reaching the critical juncture, but still we have to value the last agreement. The fourth SMA is very important for us.
Okay, Dr. Kim Cheol, Senior Research Fellow at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis. Thank you for joining us and providing your insights.
Thank you.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by 2. Now, meanwhile, the two Koreas are set for another round of working level talks, the 6th of its kind on Thursday, as they try to normalize business operations at the Inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. Some say these talks will be critical in determining the future of the joint business park. Here's our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sang-hee with the details.
Amid fading hopes for a swift normalization of their joint business park, the two Koreas are getting ready for their 6th meeting this month. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Wednesday that South Korea will remain firm with its stance on the preconditions for reopening the Kaesong Industrial Complex.
At Thursday's meeting, South Korea will focus on agreeing on the specific ways for normalizing the complex. We are very aware that the working-level talks are an important opportunity for laying out the principles for new inter-Korean relations.
Earlier this month, the two Koreas agreed in principle to resume operations at their jointly run factory zone in the north. But little progress has been made since then amid squabbles over who should take responsibility for the shutdown. Seoul wants the North to provide safeguards against another unilateral shutdown, while Pyongyang is calling for an immediate resumption of operations at the complex. But some experts say the two sides are running out of time, as the Koreas will need to produce some results before South Korea and the U.S. begin their joint military exercise, Ulji Freedom Guide, next month. Joint military drills between the two countries played a big factor in the North's unilateral shutdown of the complex 3 months ago. The North also made reference to the upcoming military drills through its state-run daily Nodong Sinmun on Sunday, warning of fresh tensions if the exercise goes ahead. And while the two Koreas remain engaged in a tug-of-war, some say Thursday's talks will be crucial in determining the future of their last remaining symbol of cooperation. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Over in China, the Beijing government is going all out to root out corruption in every sector of society. For one, it's prohibited construction of new government office compounds for the next 5 years. According to them, this is a crackdown on waste spending, and our Oh Jin-ju has the details.
China has banned the construction of new government buildings for the next 5 years, which comes as part of President Xi Jinping's campaign to crack down on corruption and waste. In a directive issued on Tuesday, the Chinese government pointed out that local departments and authorities have built huge, often extravagant office compounds in violation of regulations, tainting the image of the government and the ruling Communist Party. It said public resources should instead be spent on developing the economy and improving people's livelihoods. The ban includes the construction of special training centers and accommodations for government officials and bars officials from receiving sponsorships or collaborating with private companies on construction projects. Flashy government buildings have been a source of broad public resentment in China as local officials order new offices built for their own use. Some of these buildings have been built in impoverished areas, such as the one in the city of Fuyang in Anhui Province, eastern China. The building there is called the White House by residents and reportedly cost nearly $5 million to build. The Chinese president has made rooting out corruption a priority since he took office earlier this year and has implemented strong policies for what he called a thorough cleanup of the party. However, some experts have expressed concerns about the ban, saying that the Chinese government should implement long-term plans to tackle the root causes of corruption, rather than merely getting rid of the visible symbols of its existence. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
A wing flap presumed to be from a Boeing 777 airliner, the same type of plane that crashed in San Francisco earlier this month, was found at a farm in the vicinity of Tokyo's Narita International Airport last week. Japan's Jiji Press reported Tuesday that authorities are investigating but don't know which airline the flap came from. Narita International Airport has advised all airlines to take special precautions to prevent mechanical parts from falling off their planes and to report whether they find any planes that have lost a wing flap. Well, on a different note, on rainy days, it's of course common for people to prefer the comforts of being under a roof rather than venturing outside. So it's really no surprise that the recent string of rainy days here in Korea has had an effect on how Koreans shop. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
This is the interior of a mall in Korea. Hardly anyone is shopping, although most stores are holding sales. Major department stores in the country said that they have experienced a drop in actual sales in recent weeks, and they blame the rain. They say most people just don't have the desire to leave their homes to brave the wet conditions.
Normally, sales increase dramatically by 2 digits during the dry sales season, but we've only seen a rise in the 2% range recently.
But some businesses are weathering the storm better than others. Product distribution companies for TV and home shopping channels and online shopping networks are faring well these days.
We've seen a change ever since the rainy monsoon season started in July. Our sales have gone up 30% this year compared to sales from the same period a year ago.
Bestsellers include those that are related to the rain, such as rain boots, umbrellas, and dehumidifiers. But also there's been an increase in other items like food products and undergarments. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And as our Kim Ji-yeon just shared, department stores may be suffering from the rain, but it doesn't look like that will last very long because we will have a break from the monsoon. For details, we turn to our Hannah Kim.
Thanks, Daniel, and good evening, guys. You guys are absolutely right. We are having a break from the monsoon. The rain has cleared up in the country, and we even have some sunshine, so people are definitely going to be out and about instead of online shopping.
Right, so department stores and public places usually blast the air conditioning, so I'm sure many people will want to just cool themselves off in these places as well, but we need to conserve energy as well, so let's keep that in mind. But Hannah, the monsoon front has been so inconsistent this year. I'm not sure this break will last very long.
Well, tomorrow we may have a few showers on Jeju Island, but for the most part, it's going to look absolutely beautiful tomorrow in Korea under mostly sunny skies. It's putting me in a great mood, but we do also have extremely humid air coming into the country, so try to be as patient as possible, especially in the afternoon when it gets scorching hot. Now, I wish I can tell you that the monsoon season is over, but we do expect more rain by Sunday. If we take a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, Seoul will start off the morning at 23 and reach 32 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, cities in the south like Daegu and Busan will even peak to 35 and 31 degrees respectively. As you can see, most of our highs are reaching past the 30s. Down on Jeju Island, we may have scattered showers throughout the day. Daejeon will hit 32, while Dokdo tops out at 29. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm Hannah Kim. Have a wonderful evening.
And that's all from us. Thank you for watching.
And we'll be back same time tomorrow. Good night.